I was the best man at my cousin Marcus's wedding last summer, and I'd been looking forward to it for months. Marcus and I grew up together, more like brothers than cousins. We'd spent every summer at our grandparents' lake house, built forts in the woods behind his house, got detention together in high school for that stupid prank with the principal's car. When he asked me to be his best man, I actually teared up a little, though I'd never admit that to anyone. Everything was perfect until I became the guy who almost destroyed everything in a single misunderstood moment. The wedding was at this beautiful historic venue upstate, an old mansion with sprawling gardens and a ballroom with crystal chandeliers that looked like something out of a movie. Claire, Marcus's bride-to-be, had planned every detail obsessively for 18 months. I'd watched Marcus stress about seating charts, flower arrangements, and whether the salmon or chicken would be better for the main course. He'd become a different person during wedding planning, someone who cared deeply about napkin colors and string quartet selections. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the ceremony, and everyone was in high spirits. Both families had flown in from across the country. Marcus's parents were beaming, finally seeing their only son getting married. Claire's family had taken over 3 tables, loud and boisterous, telling embarrassing stories about her childhood. The champagne was flowing, toasts were being made, and I just finished my best man speech that got genuine laughs and a few tears. That's when Marcus pulled me aside, his face suddenly pale. "Jake, I need your help," he whispered urgently, gripping my arm. "I can't find one of Grandpa's cufflinks." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly which cufflinks he meant. Our grandfather had worn them at his own wedding 60 years ago, and at every important event after that. When he passed away 3 years ago, he'd left them specifically to Marcus in his will. Marcus had promised our grandmother, on her deathbed just last year, that he'd wear them at his wedding. It wasn't just about fashion or tradition. It was a sacred promise. "Are you sure?" I asked, though I could see the panic in his eyes. "Where did you last have them?" "I had both of them this morning when I was getting ready upstairs. I put them on the dresser in the groom's room, but now I can only find one. I've checked my pockets, my bag, everywhere." His hands were shaking as he patted down his jacket again, a gesture I'd seen him repeat probably 20 times already. "The photographer's been waiting downstairs for 30 minutes for the family portraits, and Mom's asking where I am, and I can't tell her I lost Grandpa's cufflink. She'll be devastated." I could see the weight of it crushing him. This wasn't just about a piece of jewelry. This was about honoring our grandfather's memory, keeping a promise to our grandmother, and not disappointing his mother on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. "Okay, listen," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder the way I used to when we were kids, and he'd get anxious before a big test. "Go deal with the photographer. Smile, take the pictures, keep everyone calm. I'll go upstairs and search the groom's room, top to bottom. If it's there, I'll find it." "You sure?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Marcus, you're my brother. Of course I'm sure. Now go be the groom. I've got this." He nodded, taking a deep breath, then headed back toward the main hall where his mother was waving him over with increasing urgency. I watched him paste on a smile, transform back into the happy groom, and disappear into the crowd. I headed upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. The venue was a maze of hallways and rooms, each more ornate than the last. The groom's dressing room was at the far end of the 2nd floor, past the bride's suite and several guest rooms. It was quieter up here, the sounds of the party below reduced to a distant murmur of voices and clinking glasses. The room itself was small but elegant, with antique furniture, a full-length mirror with an ornate gold frame, and windows overlooking the garden where the ceremony would take place tomorrow. Someone had left the lights on, and I could see the chaos of wedding preparation everywhere. Marcus's garment bag hung on the closet door. His shoes were kicked off near the couch. Tissue paper from gift boxes littered the coffee table. I started searching methodically, the way our grandfather had taught us to look for anything important. "Slow and steady, boys," he used to say. "Rushing makes you miss things." I checked the dresser first, moving aside cologne bottles, the ring box, loose change, and receipts. Nothing. I got down on my hands and knees, my dress pants immediately collecting dust from the antique carpet. The floor was covered in that old-fashioned pattern that made it hard to spot small objects, burgundy and gold swirls that seemed to shift in the light. I ran my hands along the baseboards, checked under the couch, moved aside every piece of furniture I could shift. I was checking behind the radiator, my shirt starting to stick to my back from the effort, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door swung open and in walked Sophie, Claire's younger sister and maid of honor. Sophie and I had met several times during the wedding planning. She was 26, a medical resident doing her rotation in pediatrics, with the kind of sharp wit that could make you laugh even when when you were exhausted. She had her sister's dark hair, but wore it shorter, just past her shoulders, and she had this habit of pushing her glasses up her nose when she was thinking. We'd bonded over being the ones who had to keep our respective bride and groom calm during the planning chaos. "What are you doing on the floor?" she asked, genuinely confused, her bridesmaid dress rustling as she stepped into the room. The dress was a deep emerald green that Claire had chosen, with layers of tulle that made it look elegant, but probably felt like wearing tin. "Looking for Marcus's cufflink," I explained, sitting back on my heels. "One of his grandfathers. He's freaking out because he can't find it." "Oh my God," Sophie said, her face immediately showing understanding. She knew the story. Everyone in both families knew about the cufflinks and what they meant. "That's terrible. Is he okay?" Barely holding it together, I admitted. "I told him I'd search up here while he deals with the photographer." "Well, this is weird timing," Sophie said, stepping further into the room and closing the door behind her. "I'm looking for something too. My bracelet, the one Mom gave me this morning. I'd seen that bracelet earlier. It was delicate, silver with small blue stones, and Sophie's mother had presented it to both her daughters that morning with tears in her eyes. It had belonged to their grandmother, and the plan was for Sophie to wear it during the ceremony, then pass it to Claire as part of the something borrowed tradition. "You think you left it here?" I asked. I was helping Claire with her dress earlier, and I took it off because I didn't want to snag the fabric. "I'm pretty sure I put it on that table by the mirror, but now it's gone." She looked genuinely worried, biting her lower lip. "If I lost Mom's bracelet, she'll never forgive me, and Claire will be devastated." So now we were both searching. Two people in formal were crawling around a tiny room like we'd lost our minds. Sophie moved toward the mirror, carefully shifting aside makeup bags, hairspray bottles, and a collection of bobby pins and hair ties that had accumulated during the day's preparations. I continued my systematic search of the floor, checking every corner, every shadow where something small and metallic might hide. "This is ridiculous," Sophie muttered, getting down on her knees, her dress poofing up around her like a green cloud. "How do small objects just disappear?" "The universe hates us," I suggested, checking under a chair for the third time. Clearly, we worked in focused silence for a few minutes, both of us aware that we were running out of time. The rehearsal dinner would be wrapping up soon, and people would notice we were both missing. I was sweating now, my carefully styled hair falling into my eyes, my tie feeling too tight around my neck. Then I heard it, a loud, definite click behind us. We both froze, our heads snapping toward the door. "Please tell me that wasn't what I think it was," Sophie said, her voice tight. I stood up, walked to the door, and turned the handle. Nothing. It didn't budge, even a millimeter. I pushed harder, throwing my shoulder against the solid wood. Still nothing. The door might as well have been part of the wall. "Are you kidding me right now?" Sophie said, her voice rising with the first edge of panic. I examined the lock more closely. It was one of those old-fashioned automatic systems, probably original to the mansion, designed to lock from the inside for privacy. Once the door closed completely, it engaged automatically. You needed a key from the outside or someone to unlock it from the hallway. We were completely trapped. "Please tell me you have your phone," I said, though I already knew the answer. Sophie patted the sides of her dress, which clearly had no pockets. "Who needs a phone during a wedding rehearsal dinner?" "I left it charging in the bride's suite." "Mine's downstairs in my jacket pocket," I admitted. I didn't think I'd need it for a quick search. We looked at each other, the reality of our situation sinking in. "Okay, don't panic," Sophie said, though I could see her starting to panic. "Someone will come looking for us eventually." Eventually could be a while, I pointed out. Everyone's downstairs eating and drinking and having a great time. This room is at the end of a hallway that nobody has any reason to come down. We started banging on the door, pounding with our fists than our shoes. Sophie kicked off her heels and used them as hammers, the sound echoing in the small room, but probably not carrying far beyond the thick door and down the long hallway. "Help!" we shouted, our voices getting hoarse. "We're locked in. Can anyone hear us?" Nothing. Just the distant sound of music and laughter from below, a world away from our increasingly desperate situation. The room was getting warmer. The old mansion didn't have the best ventilation, and with both of us moving around, breathing hard, working up a sweat, the air felt thick and stuffy. Sophie's face was flushed, small beads of sweat forming on her forehead despite her carefully applied makeup. "This dress is like wearing a sauna," she said, fanning herself with a wedding program she'd grabbed from the table. Her carefully styled hair was starting to come loose, small strands sticking to her neck. I'd loosened my tie and unbuttoned my collar, my shirt clinging to my back. We took turns banging on the door, shouting, trying different techniques. We tried to slide something under the door to trigger the lock mechanism. We attempted to pick the lock with a bobby pin, though neither of us had any idea what we were doing. 20 minutes passed, then 30. We were both exhausted, frustrated, and increasingly worried about what people downstairs must be thinking. "They're going to notice we're both gone," Sophie said, bed, sitting down on the floor with her back against the wall, her dress spreading out around her like she was sitting in the middle of a green parachute. Yeah, I agreed, joining her on the floor. We were both breathing hard. Our formal were disheveled, the room smelling of sweat and desperation. That's when we heard voices in the hallway, distant but getting closer. We both scrambled to our feet, rushing to the door. "We're locked in," we screamed, our voices raw and desperate. "Help us, we're in here." I grabbed a wire coat hanger from the closet, some insane part of my brain thinking I could pick the lock like in the movies. Sophie was back to pounding on the door with her shoe, the sound finally loud enough that someone had to hear us. "Hello," a voice called from the hallway. "Is someone there?" "Yes," we both shouted together. "We're locked in the groom's room. The door won't open." More voices joined the first, a confusion of sounds. I could hear people trying the handle from the outside, jiggling it, pushing. Then I heard Claire's voice, sharp and concerned, cutting through the others. "Where are they? This is so weird. Has anyone seen Sophie and Jake? They've both been gone for almost 40 minutes. The way she said it, grouping our names together, sent a chill down my spine despite the heat of the room. "We're in here," Sophie shouted. "Claire, we're locked in." There was a commotion in the hallway, people calling for keys, someone running to find the venue manager. It felt like another eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes before we heard the click of a key in the lock. The door finally swung open, and there stood what looked like half the wedding party. Marcus was in front, his face pale and confused. Claire was right beside him, her expression shifting from concern to something else as she took in the scene before her. Sophie was on the floor where she'd collapsed in exhaustion, fanning herself with the wedding program, her carefully styled hair now half undone, mascara slightly smudged from sweat, her dress wrinkled and dusty. I was standing in the middle of the room holding a coat hanger, my shirt untucked, tie hanging loose, sweat visible through my dress shirt, my hair a complete mess. The room looked like a disaster zone. Furniture had been moved. Items were scattered everywhere. The air was thick and warm, carrying the unmistakable smell of two people who'd been trapped and panicking for 40 minutes. We both looked guilty as hell, even though we'd done absolutely nothing wrong. Claire took one look at us, and her face transformed. The concern vanished, replaced by shock, then hurt, then anger, all in the span of about 3 seconds. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened, and then she screamed. Not a happy scream, not a surprise scream. A scream of betrayal and rage that made everyone in the hallway step back. "What were you doing in here?" she yelled, her voice shaking with emotion, her face turning red. "What the hell were you doing in here together?" "We got locked in," I shouted back, desperate for her to understand, to see the obvious truth. The door locked automatically. We were both looking for stuff and got trapped. But I could see in her eyes she didn't believe me. I watched the narrative form in her mind, fed by our appearance, the circumstances, the way we both looked disheveled and guilty. Her sister and her fiancé's best man, alone in a locked room for 40 minutes, both sweating and out of breath. Marcus was just standing there, frozen, pale as a ghost. His eyes moved between me and Sophie, back and forth, like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. His own cousin, the person he trusted more than anyone, and his future sister-in-law, in a locked room, looking like they'd been doing exactly what everyone was clearly thinking. "The door locks automatically," Sophie said, standing up with as much dignity as she could manage, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. "We were both looking for lost stuff and got trapped. That's it. That's literally all that happened." Jake was looking for Marcus's cufflink. I was looking for Mom's bracelet. We both came in separately and got stuck when the door closed. But Claire wasn't hearing it. Her eyes were filling with tears, her breath coming in short gasps. "You expect me to believe you were just coincidentally in the same room and coincidentally got locked in together the night before my wedding? Both of you looking like that." She gestured at us, at our disheveled appearance, the intimate-looking disaster of the room. The entire wedding party was now gathered in the hallway, a crowd of shocked faces. Marcus's parents were there, looking confused and concerned. Claire's mother had her hand over her mouth. Bridesmaids and groomsmen were whispering to each other, exchanging significant glances. Some faces showed sympathy, willing to believe us. Others looked suspicious, like they'd always suspected something between Sophie and me. Like this confirmed their worst theories. "This is insane," I said, my voice rising. "Marcus, you sent me up here to look for your grandfather's cufflink. You know that. You know exactly why I was in this room." Marcus's face showed he remembered, but he looked torn, caught between trusting his cousin and the evidence of his eyes. "And I told Claire I was coming up here to look for for the bracelet," Sophie added, her voice steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. I told her exactly where I was going and why. Claire shook her head, tears now streaming down her face. "You were gone for almost an hour. Both of you. Together. In a locked room. 40 minutes, Sophie corrected. And we were locked in. We were trying to get out the entire time. We were screaming and banging on the door. This hallway is soundproof. One of the groomsmen offered unhelpfully. That's why nobody heard you." "Great. Just great." That detail made everything worse. "Check the security cameras," Sophie said suddenly, her voice firm and clear. "This venue has cameras everywhere. You'll see everything. We came in separately. We started panicking immediately when we got stuck. You'll see the truth." Claire looked at her sister, really looked at her for the first time since opening the door. I could see the war happening behind her eyes, wanting to believe but afraid to. The trust of a lifetime fighting against the apparent evidence. "Fine," Claire said finally, her voice cold. "We'll check the cameras. But if you're lying to me, Sophie, if you did anything to betray me the night before my wedding, I will never forgive you. Never." The words hung in the air like a curse. The venue manager was called. He was an older gentleman who'd probably seen every kind of wedding drama imaginable, but even he looked uncomfortable with this situation. He led a small group of us downstairs to the security office, a cramped room filled with monitors showing different angles of the venue. Claire insisted on watching the footage herself. Marcus stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them staring at the screens. Sophie and I stood on the other side of the small room, not speaking, not looking at each other, both of us praying that the cameras had captured everything. The manager pulled up the footage from the hallway outside the groom's room, started from an hour before we got locked in. There I was, walking down the hallway alone, checking my phone, then entering the room. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m. 5 minutes passed on the footage. Then Sophie appeared, walking quickly, looking worried, entering the same room. 8:52 p.m. The door closed behind her. For the next 38 minutes, nothing. Just a closed door and an empty hallway. Then, at 9:30 p.m., people started appearing. First one person, then more, gathering around the door, clearly responding to sounds from inside. "Can you show us inside the room?" Claire asked, her voice tight. The manager switched to an interior camera. I hadn't even noticed there was one, mounted discreetly in the corner near the ceiling. The footage showed me entering alone, immediately starting to search, getting down on the floor, checking under furniture, moving items around. My body language was clearly focused on searching for something specific. Then Sophie entered. She and I exchanged a few words, then she started searching near the mirror. We were in different parts of the room, both clearly looking for different things. Then the door closed. The camera captured the exact moment we both realized we were locked in. Sophie walking to the door, trying the handle. Me joining her, both of us pulling, pushing, our increasing panic obvious, even in the grainy security footage. The next 40 minutes played out in fast forward. Both of us trying everything to get out. Banging on the door, shouting, using shoes as hammers, attempting to pick the lock, taking breaks to catch our breath, sitting on opposite sides of the room. Nothing even remotely inappropriate. Just two increasingly desperate people trying to escape a locked room. By the time the footage finished, Claire was crying again, but this time from relief and guilt. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Sophie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." She turned and hugged her sister, both of them crying, apologizing, holding each other tight. Marcus looked at me, his face showing shame and relief in equal measure. "Yay, man, I am sorry. I should have known. I should have trusted you immediately. It looked bad, I admitted. I get why you were worried." But even as Claire apologized, even as the truth was revealed and accepted, I could see the damage that had been done. The whispers had already started. People had already formed opinions. Some of the wedding guests, the ones who hadn't seen the footage, would always wonder, would always have that tiny seed of doubt. The rehearsal dinner was effectively over. The mood had shifted from celebration to drama to awkward relief. People started leaving, heading back to their hotels, the joy of the evening tainted by the incident. Sophie and I finally had a moment alone in the lobby while everyone else was saying their goodbyes. "That was the worst 40 minutes of my life," she said, pushing her glasses up her nose in that familiar gesture. "Same, I agree, though the aftermath might have been worse. I can't believe Claire thought we would do something like that on the night before her wedding. Fear makes people think crazy things," I said. She was scared. It looked bad. I don't blame her for reacting the way she did. I blame her a little, Sophie admitted, but I'll forgive her. Eventually. We stood there in silence for a moment, both exhausted, both still processing what had happened. "Did you ever find the cufflink?" Sophie asked suddenly. A laugh, a tired, slightly hysterical sound. "No, and you never found the bracelet. All that for nothing. Not nothing. We proved our innocence. That's something. The wedding the next day was beautiful, despite the tension from the night before. Marcus wore his grandfather's cufflink, the missing one having turned up in his pants pocket from a different suit. Sophie wore her mother's bracelet, which had been found in the bride's suite exactly where she'd thought she left it, just hidden under some tissue paper. I gave my best man speech and got genuine laughs and tears. Sophie gave her maid of honor speech and brought down the house. Claire and Marcus exchanged vows under an arch of white roses, both of them crying happy tears. But there was an undercurrent to everything, a tension that hadn't been there before. Some guests still whispered. Some still gave Sophie and me strange looks when we were in the same room. The incident had cast a shadow, however faint, over what should have been a perfect day. During the reception, I found myself standing alone on the terrace, looking out at the gardens when Marcus joined me. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, just thinking about last night, about how fast things can change, how one misunderstood moment can almost destroy everything. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm sorry I doubted you, even for a second. You're my brother, Jake. I should have trusted you immediately." "You did trust me," I said. "You sent me to find the cufflink. You believed in me enough for that. The rest was just circumstances and bad luck. Still, I should have been the first one defending you, not standing there looking shocked. You were in an impossible situation. Your bride was upset. Her family was upset. You handled it the best you could. We stood there together, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, the sounds of the reception drifting out through the open doors. You know what the worst part was?" Marcus said finally. "What?" "For those few minutes when I thought maybe something had happened, I wasn't even angry. I was just sad. Sad that I might lose my cousin and my wife's trust on the same day. Sad that everything could fall apart so fast. But it didn't fall apart," I reminded him. "We proved the truth. Claire believed us. You're married now. Everything worked out." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, "but it was close. Too close." The reception continued late into the night. The band played, people danced, champagne flowed. Claire and Marcus had their first dance, and everyone cheered. The cake was cut, toasts were made, and gradually, the tension from the night before began to fade. Sophie and I were professional and polite with each other, careful not to be seen talking alone too long, conscious of the eyes still watching us with curiosity. It was exhausting being on display like that, having to prove our innocence through our behavior, even after the cameras had shown the truth. Late in the evening, as things were winding down, Sophie found me at the bar. "This is ridiculous," she said. "We're avoiding each other like we actually did something wrong." "I know," I agreed. "But what choice do we have? People are still watching. Let them watch. We know the truth. Our families know the truth. That should be enough." She was right, but it didn't make it easier. "For what it's worth," Sophie said, "you were a good partner to be locked in a room with. You didn't panic. You tried to find solutions, and you never made me feel uncomfortable." "Thanks," I said. "You weren't bad yourself, though I could have done without the shoe hammering right next to my ear." She laughed a real laugh, and for a moment things felt normal again. The wedding ended, families went home, and life moved on. Marcus and Claire went on their honeymoon to Greece and came back tanned and happy. Sophie finished her medical residency and started her first real job as a pediatrician. I went back to my life, my job, my routine. But I think about that night sometimes, about how close we came to destroying everything, about how a simple misunderstanding, fed by circumstances and appearances, almost ruined relationships that had taken years to build. I think about how trust is both incredibly strong and incredibly fragile, how it can survive years of friendship and family bonds, but can be shaken in a moment by doubt and fear. Marcus and Claire are happy now, coming up on their first anniversary. Sophie and I are friends, real friends, bonded by that shared experience of being falsely accused and having to prove our innocence. But I'm more careful now, more aware of how things look, how situations can be misinterpreted. I'm conscious of the stories people tell themselves, the narratives they create from incomplete information. And I always carry my phone. And I check to make sure doors don't auto-lock before entering any room. Because sometimes the worst thing that can happen isn't what you actually do. It's what people think you did. And proving the truth, even with video evidence, doesn't always erase the doubt that was planted in that first moment of misunderstanding. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more.